All right, guys, so this video right here is mainly going to be about the unfortunate reality of politics, which is that politicians operate based off what is going to get them more money and what is going to get to them elected, right? How are they going to keep their jobs, right? And this incentive is not necessarily in line with what's best for the country. Getting reelected and the incentives involved in getting reelected, right? Keeping your job don't necessarily always align with what's best for the country, okay? And I'm saying this because a lot of people on the left are very critical, highly critical of the Republican Party for voting against Biden's current stimulus plan, right? No Republicans voted for it whatsoever. Senate or House, none of them voted for it. And they're not voting for it despite the fact that the polls, again, if you believe the polls, I know a lot of people here don't believe them, but if you believe the polls, most American people and even Republicans want this stimulus package, right? I've had people come out comment section and say, you know that most people support this stimulus package, right? Therefore, they're making the assumption that it is good. And what I'm telling you guys is that just because most people want something doesn't necessarily make it good. Okay? So that is to say, I have been pretty pro-stimulus, right? And I haven't departed from that because Trump came out in December, right? And advocated for a $2,000 stimulus, right? He said people should get $2,000 stimulus checks as a part of that December stimulus package. Now, it would be very hypocritical for me to come out when Biden is elected and then turn around and say that I'm against his stimulus check, right? So when it comes to the stimulus, right, I do have problems with Biden's stimulus package. However, I don't really necessarily have a problem with the stimulus checks. A lot of people are starting to have problems with the stimulus checks. I can't be one of those people that goes back on that, considering how I supported them under Trump. And I still think they're better and more efficient than a lot of the other proposals in those stimulus packages, right? And I'm talking about all of them, not just Biden's stimulus package, okay? However, the Republicans have responded to this criticism, basically saying that they're concerned about the spending. They're concerned about the debt. Okay, they're concerned about the debt, right? Some are saying they're also concerned about inflation, right? Because we have so much money being poured into this economy, right? And this economy, right, through the projections, we're projected to do very well this year, right? We're projected to have some good growth, right? Our unemployment is going down. We're at like 6%, right? Jobs reports, we've added 375,000 jobs last month. Things are going well. States are opening up. There's concern that we no longer need this stimulus and that the economy may be in danger of overheating. And I do believe that the Republicans have a solid argument on inflation. That is their best argument in regards to being against this stimulus. Because we are getting to the point where, you know, the economy is opening back up and that we do have a ton of money pouring into this economy. It might be best to take a step back and be more conservative, because at this point, 3 months has passed since December. The money that was due in December should have been done back during the summer, right? So that money was long overdue. Now we're a year after this pandemic. I'm not necessarily sure if we need more stimulus at this point, considering how we got to the point in this pandemic where it seems that we're almost right through it, right? We're still in it, but we're almost through it, right? States are opening back up. The economy's open back up. Things are looking good. Okay. So I think that's the nuanced difference there. It was more needed back in December, which should have been done back in August or July, than it is now in March, right? So let's take a look at the numbers a little bit so you guys can kind of understand the numbers they're working with in terms of public support. As congressional Democrats put the finishing touches on the American Rescue Plan, a 1.9 trillion economic relief package, new polls reveal most Americans support the raft of policies. Notably, polls find broad Republican support for the provisions of the stimulus package. Polling by Politico Morning Consult conducted from March 6th to 8th finds 59% of Republicans at least somewhat support the 1.9 trillion stimulus package. A Tuesday Pew Research poll also found 41% of Republicans supporting the bill. A CNN poll released Wednesday finds 61% of Americans overall support the relief package and 66% say it would help the economy in some way. The poll, conducted among 1,009 adults from March 3rd to 8th, also found majority support for most of the individual policies included in the bill, including larger tax credits for families at 85%, funding for K through 12 schools at 77%, and $350 billion in aid to state and local governments at 59%. Okay, so as you can see now, the poll numbers indicate that most of the American public is on board with this stimulus package. Now, politically speaking, like I tell you guys, this is a hard thing to argue against for the Republicans, right? It is a bad look for all the Republicans to come out and basically vote against this. It's a bad look. But the thing is that the Republicans could have avoided this whole scenario had the money been spent when it should have been spent, which is back in December when Trump advocated for the $2,000 stimulus checks. And the reason why is because if that would have happened, if McConnell would have pushed that through, I believe that the Republicans would have won Georgia and the Republicans would have the Senate, in which they would have a lot more control over the legislation. They will be able to make the stimulus more targeted. I think everybody that is being mindful of the debt agrees that the stimulus should have been more targeted. Now, politically speaking, does that work for it to be more targeted? Because there's a lot of people that's probably going to be mad that the Democrats lowered the income threshold for the cutoff for the stimulus checks, right? Under Trump's stimulus checks, I think it was up to 100,000 or something before the cutoff starts. And even then, that wasn't a whole cutoff. But under Biden's proposal, if you make more than 80K, you're done, right? You don't get a stimulus at all. That's going to piss a lot of people off because those people are paying taxes. And it seems like there are people getting checks that aren't working as hard as those people, or that aren't working at all, that are getting checks that are being paid for by those who are not getting compensated, right? So, that type of stuff, really, politically, it's not easy, right, to go with these type of policies. However, the GOP finds themselves at a crossroads here because, again, they could have controlled this legislation had they did what they should have done back in December when Trump advised them to, hey, let's increase this to $2,000. Let's one up the Democrats and win back the Senate. And then at that point, it would have put probably more pressure on the Biden administration to probably spend a little bit less. Right now, they obviously, the Democrats, we know how they always spend. They probably could have tried to spend more, but the Republicans had control. Right? What also doesn't play in the Republicans' favor is that for all the fear-mongering about the debt, the Republicans haven't done anything about it, particularly. Right? So let's look at the federal debt here, which is the debt as a percentage of GDP. And we're at the highs we've been since World War II, guys. Right? And this is the third quarter of 2020. We're going to have more data later. But we're at 127% of GDP. Again, the highest since World War II. That's the highest since World War II. Our debt is outgrowing our economy. That's how much debt we're in. And guys, I'm concerned about the debt. I'm very concerned about the debt. And that's why when Republicans start talking about the debt and the deficit, a lot of it just falls on deaf ears because when they're in office, it's almost like none of them actually want to take care of the debt. Now, again, guys, I'm just showing you the facts. I'm not trying to give you canned talking points. If you want canned talking points, this is not the channel for that, right? I'm just showing you the facts. Because for as much as the Democrats do run up the deficit, right? The Republicans, when they got in office here, you can see Trump in 2016, 2017, 2018, 2019. Let's take away 2020 here because, obviously COVID happened. The deficit is continuing to rise. And this was after the Trump tax cuts, which a lot of that was done by the established Republicans. That was something that McConnell really wanted to do, right? And, this deficit thing kind of shows that, as you can see here, the deficit continued to increase, and it looks like it was projected to continue to increase because the Republicans like cutting taxes, and I love cutting taxes too. In my ideal world, I would want the middle class to pay the lowest tax rate. In my ideal world, if I was running the government, that's probably what I would do. The middle class and the upper middle class, they paying the less because I feel like the middle and upper middle class people are the hardest working people in this country, right? They're the backbone of our economy. They're the backbone of our society. We should incentivize people to be middle class, right? And to become upper middle class, okay? However, they cut taxes, but they never cut spending, right? And when you cut taxes, but you don't cut spending, then the deficit continues to rise. That's just is what it is. This is showing up. This is the data, right? But the reason why they don't do it, guys, is because for all the talk, it's not good for getting reelected. It's not good for getting reelected. Let's take a look. This is from the Congressional Budget Office. This is the 2019 infographic, right? You can see for 2019, they don't have the 2020 data yet, or at least I couldn't find it. Our revenues are 3.5 trillion. Our expenditures was 4.4 trillion. Mandatory spending was 2.7 trillion. Discretionary spending was 1.3 trillion. Our net interest is 0.4 trillion, right? So as you can see, our spending outweighs our revenues. Now, look at where we get our revenues from. Payroll taxes, individual income taxes. Obviously, Republicans can't come out and say they want to increase taxes, right? Obviously, that's against the Republican ideology here. You're going to lose an election if you do that. So let's look at our expenditures here. With our expenditures, mandatory spending, Social Security. Can Republicans win elections if they say they want to cut Social Security? Probably not. Medicare, $644 billion. Can they win elections if they say they want to cut Medicare? Probably not. Medicaid, $409 billion. Can they win elections saying they want to cut that? Probably not. Now let's look at discretionary spending, right? Discretionary spending is what the spending that actually can be controlled year to year, right? Defense spending. Any Republicans say they want to cut funding to the military. You think those people going to get elected? Probably not. Non-defense spending. Now, this is on programs like transportation, education, veteran benefits, housing assistance, other activities. That's about $6 billion. That's about $600 billion. Other is unemployment compensation, federal, civilian, military retirement, veterans benefits, income tax credits, food stamps, other mandatory programs, minus the income from offsetting receipts. So if you look at the spending here, and then you have our net interest, obviously. But if you look at the spending here, guys, Republicans, right? It's one of those things where the reason why it's very hard for a lot of the mainstream to take Republicans seriously on the debt is because when it comes time to do something about the debt, they continue to run up the debt, but they won't cut spending. And I know why they won't do it. They won't do it because they can't get elected if they do that, right? Cutting Social Security would be a death sentence for anybody running in politics, right? You can't run on that. So my whole point is this, guys. The Republicans, when they get in office, need to really start doing something about the deficit and the debt, okay? The rhetoric of the Democrats running up the debt and being a party of fiscal responsibility is not going to continue to work anymore unless they actually become the party of fiscal responsibility. Because the facts speak for themselves. Okay? And this is why I always try to tell people when people want to argue about, tax increases versus tax cuts, like at the end of the day, the deficit is what matters, right? The government has revenues, it has expenditures, just like any other business, even though the government's not really a business, but right, they have revenues and expenditures. If you cut revenues, but you don't cut spending, then you're going to get more debt, right? And cutting that revenue may increase economic growth, and it definitely does, right? But it's not paying for itself because the deficit increases, right? This is just the facts. So the thing is that both parties need to come together to really try to figure out this debt thing, right? In an ideal world, but the Republicans really need to start taking care of the debt, because otherwise, when the Democrats go and spend like this, right? As you can see that graph I showed you guys, the deficit really got ran up under Obama. But see, when the Democrats spend like that, your message is less politically serious when you do the exact same thing, right? It's less serious. You can't come out here and say, well, you know, the Democrats are running up debt and deficit, but then under the Republicans, you're doing the same thing. You can't do that. You got to become the party of fiscal responsibility, and I'm all for that. That's why I want the Republicans to be. That's why I'm making this video, because I want the Republicans to actually start living up to what they're saying when it comes to fiscal responsibility. Hard choices are going to have to be made. Our debt to GDP ratio is projected to be over 200% by 2050 by the Congressional Budget Office, right? And that's in a rosy picture, guys. That's if we get rid of all the tax cuts and we don't get another pandemic. The Democrats stop with these big spending programs and interest rates stay low, right? We're basically living assuming that interest rates are going to stay below 3 to 4% forever, and that's not what's going to happen. Okay? When inflation creeps up inevitably, which it will, we're going to have to increase the interest rates, right? And that's really going to make it hard for the economy, right? It's really going to make it hard. And that in and of itself is a form of a tax, right? It's an invisible tax. Okay? So, you know, the thing is that we're headed down a road when it comes to debt in which the Republican fear-mongering about the debt is real. But people can't take it as serious when they're not actually doing anything about it. And the Republican Party needs to be the party of uncomfortable truths. It's comfortable to tell everybody that, you know, tax cuts pay for themselves. But it's uncomfortable to tell people that, yeah, we're giving you this tax cut, but it's going to cost. The same way the Democrats spending out of control is going to cost. Both of them cost. None of them want to cut spending. Both parties don't want to cut spending. And guys, I'm all about paying low taxes. I want to pay as little money to the government as possible. But I am afraid of the invisible tax, which is inflation. And if both parties refuse to do anything about the current direction we're headed in terms of this debt, we all going to be paying more taxes and inflation. So I don't want that to happen. And that's why I'm making this video, right? So let me know what you guys think. Make sure you like, comment, and subscribe. Most importantly, share a Black conservative perspective. Peace.